Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Steel. Vince Marlowe had built his empire from nothing. At 52, he commanded a construction and real estate development company worth 8 figures, his calloused hands still bearing the scars from his early days swinging hammers alongside migrant workers. Unlike the silver spoon executives he now competed against, Vince understood every bolt, every beam, every drop of sweat that went into creating something lasting. His office overlooked the Seattle skyline, where 3 of his residential towers pierced the clouds. Photos lined his desk. Linda, his wife of 25 years, her auburn hair catching sunlight in their wedding portrait. Rebecca, 23, graduating from law school. And Tommy, 19, in his army uniform before shipping overseas. The perfect American family, or so he believed. Vince's phone buzzed with a text from his site foreman, Miguel Santos, a man he'd trusted for 15 years. "Boss, need you to see something. Private. Can't talk over phone." 30 minutes later, Vince stood in the skeletal frame of his newest luxury development in Bellevue, steel beams casting shadows across the concrete floor. Miguel approached with hesitation, his weathered face grim. "Vince, I've been wrestling with this for weeks," Miguel began, his accent thick with emotion. "You've been good to me, to my family. But I can't stay quiet anymore." He handed Vince a manila envelope. Inside were photographs, grainy but unmistakable. Linda, his wife, wrapped in another man's arms outside the Fairmont Hotel. The timestamp showed 3 months ago. More photos followed. Intimate dinners, hands intertwined, passionate kisses in parking garages. The man was Trevor Hamilton, Vince's business competitor and former friend. They'd grown up in the same working-class neighborhood. But where Vince had clawed his way up through honest labor, Trevor had charmed his way into wealth through his father's political connections and strategic marriages to wealthy widows. "There's more," Miguel said quietly. "My cousin works valet at the Fairmont. Says they've been meeting there twice a week for 6 months. Always the same suite. Trevor pays cash, uses a fake name." Vince studied each photograph with the same methodical precision he applied to structural blueprints. His expression never changed, but Miguel noticed his hands, those powerful hands that had built an empire, trembling slightly. "Miguel," Vince said finally, his voice steady as reinforced concrete, "you've done me a favor I'll never forget. But I need you to promise me something. Not a word to anyone. Not your wife, not your cousin, not even your priest. Can you do that?" Miguel nodded solemnly. "Whatever you need, Vince." That evening, Vince sat in his home office, the photos spread across his mahogany desk like evidence in a crime scene. Through the window, he could see Linda tending to her prized rose garden, the same garden he'd spent 3 weekends building raised beds for last spring. She was humming, actually humming, while she watered flowers he'd paid for with money he'd earned breaking his back. The house itself was a testament to his love for his family. 4,000 square feet of custom-crafted perfection in the exclusive Medina neighborhood. Every fixture hand-selected, every room designed around his family's preferences. Linda's art studio occupied the entire 3rd floor. Rebecca's law books filled custom-built shelves in the library. Even Tommy's room remained untouched, waiting for his return from deployment. Linda entered his office carrying a glass of his favorite bourbon, neat, just as she had every evening for 2 decades. She leaned down to kiss his cheek, her perfume, expensive perfume he'd bought her for their anniversary, filling his nostrils. "How was your day, honey?" she asked, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. Vince looked at his wife, really looked at her. At 46, she remained stunning, her figure maintained through personal trainers and yoga instructors he funded. Her manicured nails, the subtle plastic surgery that had erased years from her face, the designer clothes that filled 2 walk-in closets, all purchased with his money while she played house and, apparently, played with Trevor Hamilton. "Productive," he replied, sliding the photos into his desk drawer. "Very productive." Chapter 2. The Text That Changed Everything. 3 weeks passed. Vince had conducted his investigation with the same meticulous attention to detail he applied to foundation inspections. Private investigator reports confirmed what Miguel's photos had revealed. Linda and Trevor weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future together. The recordings were particularly enlightening. Trevor's voice, captured through the PI's sophisticated equipment. Once the divorce is final, we'll have enough from Vince's assets to start fresh in Costa Rica. My contacts there can help us establish new identities if needed. Linda's response chilled him. He's been so generous lately, almost like he knows. Last week, he surprised me with a deed to our daughter's new house. Perfect timing. We can liquidate everything. Vince had indeed been generous. The house in Wallingford, a $1.2 million craftsman that Rebecca had fallen in love with, was his surprise graduation gift. He'd bought it outright, refusing to let his daughter start her legal career burdened by mortgage debt. The previous day, he'd also transferred funds for furniture, renovations, and a year's worth of utilities. His children's reactions had been telling. Rebecca's response was a perfunctory text. "Thanks, Dad." Tommy, calling from his base in Germany, had at least managed genuine gratitude before mentioning he couldn't wait to see the house when he returned. But it was Rebecca's behavior that truly opened Vince's eyes. Ever since graduating law school, she'd grown distant, entitled, treating him more like an ATM than a father. Her new boyfriend, a smooth-talking trust fund baby named Chad Morrison, had only encouraged this attitude. The revelation came Thursday evening when Vince was reviewing construction invoices in his home office. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "You weren't invited to dinner. Mom doesn't want you there." He stared at the message, reading it 3 times. Dinner. He'd forgotten. It was supposed to be a celebration of Rebecca's new job at a downtown law firm, a position she'd secured partly through connections he'd provided. He'd been invited, had even taken time off work, bought an expensive bottle of champagne. Vince called Rebecca immediately. "Sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, Dad." Rebecca's voice was cold, mechanical. "Mom explained everything. About how you've been suspicious and controlling lately. How you've been following her around, questioning her friends. She's uncomfortable having you here." The accusations hit like physical blows. Following her? He'd done nothing but work 16-hour days to maintain the lifestyle they'd all grown accustomed to. Controlling? He'd given them everything they'd ever wanted and plenty they hadn't even asked for. "Rebecca, I think your mother has given you some incorrect." "Dad, just stop. Chad and I are starting our own lives now. We don't need your drama." The line went dead. Vince sat in his office for exactly 12 minutes, processing what had just occurred. His daughter, his little girl who used to help him build birdhouses in the garage, had just cast him out of her life based on lies fed to her by her cheating mother. Then he moved with decisive action. First, he called his bank. "This is Vincent Marlowe. I need to stop payment on check number 47823 and reverse the electronic transfer authorization 552 AHG. Yes, immediately." Next, he accessed his online accounts and began methodically canceling automatic payments. Utilities for Rebecca's house. Insurance premiums. The furniture store payment plan. The contractor installing her custom kitchen. Each cancellation generated a confirmation email, which he systematically deleted from his phone. By the time he finished, 174 separate financial commitments had been severed. Rebecca's dream house would sit empty, half-furnished, with utilities being disconnected within days. His phone began ringing immediately. First Rebecca, then Linda, then Chad. He let each call go to voicemail, instead pouring himself a bourbon and opening his laptop. If his family wanted to play games, he'd teach them the difference between games and war. Chapter 3. The Architecture of Vengeance. Vince's phone had collected 47 missed calls and 63 text messages by Friday morning. He read each one with the dispassionate interest of a structural engineer examining stress points. Rebecca's messages evolved from confusion to anger to desperation. "Dad, what happened to the house payments? The electricity was shut off this morning. Chad's parents are asking questions. Please call me back. This is important. I'm sorry, okay? Just fix this, please." Linda's texts were more manipulative, Vince, you're being childish. Rebecca is crying. You need to fix whatever tantrum this is. People are starting to ask questions about our marriage. We need to talk immediately. But it was the message from an unknown number that caught his attention. Mr. Marlowe, this is Trevor Hamilton. I think we should meet. Vince smiled for the first time in weeks. He spent the morning at his construction site, watching his crews pour foundation concrete for a new commercial complex. The precision required for a perfect foundation was absolute. One miscalculation, one shortcut, and the entire structure would fail. The same principle applied to revenge. That afternoon, he met with his attorney, Harvey Goldstein, a sharp-eyed man who'd handled Vince's business affairs for 15 years. Harvey's office occupied the top floor of a downtown tower, its windows providing a commanding view of Elliott Bay. I need you to prepare some documents, Vince said, sliding a typed list across Harvey's mahogany desk. Asset protection, mostly. Separate business holdings from personal assets. Harvey studied the list, his eyebrows rising steadily. Vince, this looks like you're preparing for a divorce. A very hostile divorce. Just following your previous advice about protecting my business interests. The offshore accounts, the trust structures, this goes well beyond standard asset protection. You're talking about moving significant wealth completely outside potential settlement claims. Harvey, I built my company with my own hands and my own money. If someone wants to challenge that, they'll need to prove their contribution. Vince leaned forward. How long will this take? With the complexity you're requesting? 6 weeks, maybe 8. I need it in 3. Harvey set down the papers. Vince, I've known you for 15 years. You're the most methodical man I've ever met. You don't rush anything. What's happening? For a moment, Vince considered sharing everything. Harvey was bound by attorney-client privilege, and his counsel had always been sound. But this was bigger than legal strategy. Let's just say I'm planning for contingencies. That evening, Vince invited Miguel to his house for dinner. Linda was notably absent, attending a book club meeting that Vince knew was actually a rendezvous with Trevor. Rebecca was presumably dealing with her utility crisis. Over plates of takeout Chinese food, the two men sat in Vince's kitchen, the same kitchen where he'd once helped his children with homework, where Linda had once prepared family meals instead of scheming betrayals. Miguel, I need to ask you about your nephew Carlos, the one who works for Hamilton Construction. Miguel's face darkened. Carlos is a good kid, Vince. Whatever you're thinking, I'm not asking him to do anything illegal, but I need information. Trevor's current projects, his financial situation, his business practices, things that might be available to someone with access to his office files. Vince, Trevor Hamilton is dangerous. My Carlos needs that job. If this works the way I plan, Carlos won't need to work for Trevor much longer, because Trevor won't have a company to run. Miguel studied his friend's face, recognizing the cold determination that had built Marlowe Construction from a one-man operation into a regional powerhouse. What do you need to know? Vince pulled out a notebook, already filled with meticulous planning. Everything. His contracts, his suppliers, his subcontractors, his permit applications, his inspection schedules, his loan agreements. But most importantly, I need to know about the Eastgate Commons project. Miguel nodded slowly. Eastgate Commons was Trevor's most ambitious project, a $40 million mixed-use development that would make or break his company. If it succeeded, Trevor would join the ranks of Seattle's elite developers. If it failed, Carlos mentioned something about problems with that project. Permit delays, contractor issues. I want to know everything Carlos can find. And Miguel? This conversation never happened. Later that night, alone in his office, Vince spread architectural drawings across his desk. Not for his own projects, but detailed plans he'd acquired through carefully cultivated relationships in the city planning department. Plans for Eastgate Commons, showing every specification, every load-bearing calculation, every system integration. He found exactly what he was looking for on page 47, a critical flaw in the foundation design that Trevor's engineers had somehow missed. The building would be structurally sound for normal use, but one specific type of stress, the kind that might occur during a major earthquake, would cause catastrophic failure. Seattle sat on multiple fault lines. Earthquake preparedness wasn't just recommended, it was legally mandated. Vince picked up his phone and dialed a number from memory. Rodriguez Engineering, this is Carmen. Carmen, this is Vince Marlowe. I need to speak with your husband about a consultation job. Private client, very confidential, excellent compensation. Dr. Antonio Rodriguez was the city's most respected seismic engineer, the man called in whenever earthquake safety questions arose. He was also a man who owed Vince a considerable favor. Vince's company had built Antonio's custom home at cost after Antonio had helped navigate some tricky foundation issues on an early Marlowe project. Antonio, I have a hypothetical question about earthquake preparedness. By midnight, Vince had outlined the opening moves of his campaign. Trevor Hamilton had built his success on charm, connections, and cutting corners. Vince would use each of those strengths against him. But first, he needed to deal with his family's growing desperation. His phone rang again, Rebecca calling for the 15th time that day. This time, he answered, Dad, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours. I've been busy. Busy? Dad, they shut off our water today. Chad's parents are asking if we can afford this house. My boss is wondering why I gave an address where I can't actually live. Interesting problem. Dad, I don't understand what's happening. Did the bank make a mistake? Are you having financial troubles? Rebecca, let me ask you something. When you texted me yesterday about dinner, did you think about how that would make me feel? Silence stretched across the line. Dad, Mom said you were being paranoid and your mother said, and you believed her without question, without talking to me, without considering that the man who's provided for you your entire life might deserve the benefit of the doubt. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You chose to exclude me from your celebration based on accusations you never bothered to verify. So now you can celebrate without my financial support as well. Dad, please. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough, Rebecca. Sorry doesn't fix broken trust. Sorry doesn't undo betrayal. He hung up and turned off his phone. In 3 weeks, when his asset protection strategy was complete, he would show them all the true meaning of consequences. Chapter 4. The web begins to weave. 3 weeks later, Vince's financial fortress was complete. Harvey Goldstein had outdone himself, creating a labyrinthine structure of offshore accounts, shell companies, and irrevocable trusts that would make Vince's assets virtually untouchable in any divorce proceeding. The beauty of the system was its complete legality, aggressive but unassailable. Simultaneously, Carlos Rodriguez had provided a treasure trove of intelligence about Trevor's operations. Trevor Hamilton Construction was leveraged to the breaking point, with the Eastgate Commons project consuming every available dollar and several million borrowed against future profits. Any significant delay or cost overrun would trigger a cascade of financial failures. Vince reviewed Carlos's latest report while sipping coffee in his downtown office. Trevor's company was scheduled to pour the foundation for Eastgate Commons in 2 weeks. All permits were in place, all inspections scheduled. Everything was proceeding perfectly according to Trevor's timeline. That was about to change. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Antonio Rodriguez. Report submitted to city planning as requested. Anonymous tip about potential seismic issues at Eastgate site. They'll have to halt construction pending review. Vince smiled and immediately called Miguel. Phase 1 is active. Is Carlos ready for Phase 2? He's nervous, Vince. Trevor's been asking questions about information leaks. Tell Carlos to stay calm and follow the script we discussed. Today's the day. That afternoon, Carlos Rodriguez accessed Trevor's computer system during the lunch hour rush when the office was largely empty. His assignment was simple. Alter a single line in the Eastgate Commons database, changing the delivery date for critical foundation materials from next Tuesday to next month. The beauty of the sabotage was its subtlety. When the steel delivery failed to arrive, Trevor would scramble to locate the missing order, eventually discovering the clerical error in his own system. But by then, the foundation pour would be delayed, putting him behind schedule and triggering penalty clauses with his general contractor. More importantly, the delay would give Dr. Rodriguez's seismic review time to work its way through the bureaucracy. While Carlos executed his mission, Vince drove to Wallingford to inspect Rebecca's house. The property sat empty and abandoned, weeds already beginning to overrun the professionally landscaped yard. Window notices from utility companies created a patchwork of warnings across the front door. Rebecca's BMW was parked in the driveway, and through the window, Vince could see her sitting on the floor in what would have been the living room, talking animatedly on her phone. Her gestures were sharp, frustrated, the body language of someone whose privileged world was crumbling. He didn't approach the house. Not yet. Instead, he drove to his next appointment, lunch with Chad Morrison's father. Robert Morrison was old Seattle money, a man whose family had profited from lumber and shipping for 3 generations. He occupied a corner table at the Columbia Tower Club, his silver hair perfectly styled, his custom suit impeccable. Robert had agreed to the meeting after Vince's cryptic phone call about mutual interests regarding our children. "Mr. Marlowe," Robert said as Vince approached the table, "I appreciate you reaching out. Rebecca seems like a lovely girl, though I understand there have been some financial complications recently." Vince ordered a steak, medium rare, and got straight to business. "Robert, your son is dating my daughter. I think we should discuss their future prospects." "Indeed, though I have to say, the situation with their house has raised some concerns. Chad mentioned utilities being shut off, contractors walking off the job. Is everything all right with your business?" "My business is excellent. In fact, I'm expanding. But I wanted to discuss Chad's employment prospects with your firm." Robert Morrison Sr. ran a boutique investment firm managing portfolios for Seattle's elite families. Chad worked there in a junior position, largely ceremonial, trading on his family name rather than any particular talent. "What did you have in mind?" "I'm considering some significant investments. The kind that might require specialized financial guidance. The kind that could be very lucrative for the right advisor." Vince cut his steak methodically. "I understand Chad has ambitions beyond his current role." Robert's eyes sharpened with interest. "How significant are we talking?" "8 figures to start. Possibly more as the relationship develops." This was true. Vince had recently liquidated several properties and was genuinely considering new investment vehicles, though not necessarily with the Morrison firm. That would certainly be substantial enough to warrant Chad taking on a more prominent role. "What sort of timeline did you have in mind?" "That depends on several factors. Chad's commitment to my daughter, for instance. The stability of their relationship." Robert nodded knowingly. Young people today can be impulsive. Perhaps Chad would benefit from understanding the potential ramifications of his personal choices. "I'm sure he would." They finished lunch, discussing investment strategies and mutual acquaintances. Robert promised to have a frank conversation with his son about the importance of stability and long-term planning. Vince knew exactly what that conversation would entail. Chad would be told to either commit completely to Rebecca, including dealing with whatever financial drama was affecting her family, or end the relationship before it jeopardized his career prospects. Either outcome suited Vince's purposes perfectly. That evening, he received the call he'd been expecting. "Vince, this is Trevor. I think it's time we talk face to face." "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Meet me at McGillicuddy's tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. Come alone." McGillicuddy's was a dive bar in Georgetown, the kind of place where blue-collar workers drank after long shifts and conversations were lost in the noise of pool games and jukebox music. An odd choice for a meeting between 2 successful businessmen, but Trevor had always fancied himself a man of the people. "I'll be there." After hanging up, Vince called his private investigator. "I need surveillance on the Fairmont Hotel tomorrow night, Suite 412. Full documentation of anyone entering or leaving." Trevor might think he was clever, arranging a meeting while presumably planning to spend the evening with Linda. But Vince had spent weeks learning Trevor's patterns, his habits, his weaknesses. Tomorrow night would be the beginning of Trevor's education about the difference between charm and power. Chapter 5. The Confrontation. McGillicuddy's reeked of stale beer and decades of cigarette smoke, even though smoking had been banned for years. Vince arrived 10 minutes early, choosing a corner booth with clear sight lines to all entrances. He nursed a bourbon and watched construction workers and dock laborers unwind from their shifts. Trevor arrived precisely at 8, his usual punctuality intact despite the chaos now surrounding his business. He traded his normal designer suits for jeans and a flannel shirt, playing dress-up as a common man. The affectation irritated Vince more than he'd expected. "Vince!" Trevor slid into the booth opposite him, his blue eyes scanning the room nervously. "Thanks for coming. You said we needed to talk." Trevor ordered a beer from the battered waitress, buying time to organize his thoughts. When she left, he leaned forward, his voice low but urgent. "I know what's happening. The permit delays, the material mix-ups, the mysterious seismic review. You're sabotaging my project." Vince's expression remained neutral. "That's a serious accusation. Also completely unprovable. Cut the shit, Vince. We've known each other for 30 years. I know how your mind works, how methodical you are when someone crosses you. If someone had crossed me, I imagine I'd be quite methodical about addressing it." Trevor's jaw tightened. "Linda told me about the problems at home. Rebecca's house, the canceled payments. She's worried about you." The mention of Linda's name brought a cold smile to Vince's lips. "I'm sure she is. Tell me, Trevor, when Linda expresses these concerns about my mental state, is that before or after you two finish fucking in your hotel suite?" Trevor's face went ashen. For a moment, the confident charm that had carried him through life completely abandoned him. "I don't know what you think you know. I know everything." Vince pulled out his phone, swiping to a video file. The screen showed Trevor and Linda in passionate embrace outside the Fairmont Hotel, timestamp clear in the corner. "I know about your twice-weekly meetings. I know about your plans to relocate to Costa Rica after my divorce settlement funds your early retirement. I know about the fake identities your contacts have arranged." Trevor stared at the phone screen, watching his own betrayal play out in high definition. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to plan accordingly." "Vince, you have to understand." "No, Trevor, you have to understand. You made a choice to steal my wife. Linda made a choice to betray our marriage. My daughter made a choice to side with her mother based on lies. Each of you thought you could manipulate me, use me, discard me when convenient." Vince leaned back, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Now you all get to live with the consequences of those choices." Trevor's confidence was returning, the practiced charm reasserting itself. "Look, emotions are running high, but we can work this out. Linda isn't happy in your marriage, hasn't been for years. Maybe this is an opportunity for everyone to find what they really want." "What I really want," Vince said softly, "is to watch your world burn." "Jesus, Vince, listen to yourself. This isn't you. You're talking about destroying people's lives over a relationship that was already broken. My relationship wasn't broken. It was sabotaged by a man I considered a friend and a woman I trusted with everything I'd built." Trevor leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Okay, you're hurt. I get it. But think practically. Linda and I were good together, and you'll be better off without a marriage that was making everyone miserable. We can handle this like civilized adults. Civilized adults don't scheme to steal each other's spouses. They don't plan to flee the country with assets obtained through fraud." "Fraud? Vince, she's your wife. She's entitled to half of everything in a divorce." Vince smiled, and Trevor felt ice forming in his stomach. "Actually, she's entitled to half of the marital assets that exist at the time of divorce. Unfortunately, most of my wealth has been restructured in ways that place it well beyond any settlement claims." Trevor's beer sat untouched as the implications sank in. "You moved your assets offshore. I protected my business interests from potential threats. Perfectly legal, completely bulletproof. You bastard. You planned this whole thing. I responded to your actions. There's a difference." Trevor's composure finally cracked. "Fine. You want to play hardball? Linda's already filed for separation. Her attorney is very confident about piercing whatever asset protection schemes you've cooked up. Linda's attorney is welcome to try. I'm curious which one she hired. Brennan and Associates. Patricia Brennan herself." Vince nodded approvingly. "Patricia's very good. Expensive but effective. Of course, she'll need to be paid, and Linda doesn't have access to our joint accounts anymore. How is she covering the retainer?" Trevor's silence confirmed what Vince had suspected. "You're funding Linda's divorce attorney. That's generous of you. considering your own financial situation. My financial situation is fine. Is it? Because my sources suggest the Eastgate Commons delays are causing some cash flow problems. Penalty clauses, contractor cancellations, interest on bridge loans. How long can you sustain those losses while also paying for Linda's legal fees? Trevor stood abruptly. This conversation is over. Sit down, Trevor. I'm not finished. Something in Vince's tone made Trevor hesitate. The voice carried absolute authority, the kind of command that had directed construction crews through dangerous work sites. You wanted this meeting. You're going to hear what I came to say. Trevor sat slowly, his eyes never leaving Vince's face. Here's what's going to happen. Your Eastgate Commons project will fail. The seismic review will find serious structural flaws that actually exist in your design, flaws you should have caught if you weren't cutting corners to maximize profits. The resulting delays will trigger a cascade of contract failures and financial penalties that will bankrupt your company. You can't prove those flaws exist. I don't need to prove anything. I just need Dr. Antonio Rodriguez to find them during his review, which he will, because they're actually there. Trevor's face went pale. Rodriguez? You got Rodriguez involved. Linda will discover that I've made myself essentially judgment-proof. Her attorney will take whatever money you've given her and then decline to continue representation when it becomes clear there are no assets to pursue. At that point, she'll come crawling back, begging for reconciliation. And you'll take her back? I'll show her exactly the same mercy she showed me when she was planning her new life in Costa Rica. Vince stood, dropping a 20 on the table. Enjoy your evening, Trevor. I believe Linda is waiting for you at the Fairmont. Of course, you might want to consider whether you can still afford the suite, given your impending financial difficulties. He started to leave, then turned back. Oh, and Trevor? Tell Linda I said hello. Chapter 6, The Trap Springs. The next morning brought exactly the results Vince had anticipated. Rebecca called before 7 a.m., her voice thick with tears and desperation. Dad, something's wrong with Chad. He's been acting strange since yesterday, asking weird questions about our relationship, about long-term plans. His father called him last night, and they talked for 2 hours. Now Chad says we need to reassess our situation until things stabilize. Vince sipped his coffee, watching the sunrise paint Seattle's skyline in shades of gold and crimson. What sort of things need to stabilize? My living situation. The house payments. He says his family is concerned about our financial stability. The words came out in a rush, as if saying them quickly would lessen their sting. Vince could picture his daughter sitting in her powerless house, still in pajamas, her privileged world collapsing around her. And what did you tell him? I told him it was just a misunderstanding, that you'd fix everything. You will fix everything, won't you, Dad? I can't lose Chad. I can't lose the house. Everyone in my law firm is asking questions about why I gave an address where I can't actually live. Rebecca, do you remember what you texted me 3 weeks ago? Silence stretched across the line. You told me I wasn't invited to your celebration dinner because Mom said I couldn't be trusted. You chose to believe her lies over trusting the man who raised you, provided for you, loved you unconditionally for 23 years. Dad, I was confused. Mom made it sound like. Your mother made it sound like I was the problem. And you believed her without question. Just like you believed her when she told you I was being paranoid and controlling. I know I made a mistake. You made a choice, Rebecca. You chose sides. Unfortunately, you chose the wrong side. The call went silent except for Rebecca's muffled sobs. Dad, please. I'm sorry. I'll do anything to fix this. You can't fix betrayal, sweetheart. You can only live with the consequences. He hung up and immediately called his attorney. Harvey, it's time to file the divorce papers. Everything we discussed. Vince, are you sure? Once we file, there's no going back. Linda will know you've been planning this for weeks. She'll know I've been protecting myself from thieves and liars. File them today. 2 hours later, Vince received the call he'd been expecting from his private investigator. Mr. Marlowe, we've got a problem. Last night at the Fairmont, Linda never showed up. Our surveillance caught Trevor entering the suite alone around 9 p.m. He waited for 3 hours, made several phone calls, then left around midnight. From his body language, he was extremely agitated. Interesting. Any idea where Linda was? Actually, yes. She spent the evening at Patricia Brennan's law office. Came out around 11 p.m., carrying several boxes of documents. Our contact in the building says Brennan's been working around the clock on a rush case. Vince smiled. Linda had finally realized the game was afoot and was scrambling to protect herself. But her efforts were several weeks too late. His phone rang immediately, Linda's number. Vince, we need to talk. I'm coming home. I'll be here. Linda arrived 30 minutes later, her usually immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her makeup hastily applied, her hands shaking slightly as she entered his office. Vince, I know about the divorce papers. Patricia Brennan moves quickly. I'm impressed. This is insane. We can work things out. We've been married for 25 years. 25 years that apparently meant nothing to you. Linda's eyes filled with tears, or at least a performance of tears. I made mistakes. I got confused, lost sight of what was important. But we can fix this. Can we fix the 6 months you spent planning my humiliation? Can we fix the apartment in Costa Rica? The fake identities? The detailed discussions about liquidating my assets? Linda's face went white. How do you? I know everything, Linda. Every meeting, every plan, every lie you told our daughter to turn her against me. She collapsed into the leather chair across from his desk, the same chair where she'd sat for countless evenings, playing the devoted wife while plotting his destruction. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Trevor and we just connected. The marriage has been dead for years, Vince. We've been going through the motions. Our marriage was fine until you decided to destroy it. Fine. Vince, you work 18-hour days. You're never here, never present, never emotionally available. I've been lonely for years. I worked 18-hour days to provide for this family. Every hour, every sacrifice, every deal I made was to give you and our children everything you wanted. Money isn't everything. It is when you're planning to steal it. Linda's tears dried up, replaced by a calculating hardness he'd never seen before. Patricia says, I'm entitled to half of everything. The house, the business, the investments. All of it. Patricia is welcome to pursue whatever she thinks she can get. But I think she'll find my assets are somewhat more complex than they appear. What does that mean? It means you should have thought about financial security before you started fucking my business rival. The crude language made Linda flinch. In 25 years of marriage, Vince had never spoken to her with such contempt. Patricia is very confident. Patricia is an excellent attorney who will take your money and deliver disappointing results. Because there's nothing for her to pursue. Linda stood, her composure cracking. You can't hide money forever, Vince. Courts have ways of finding hidden assets. I haven't hidden anything. I've legally restructured my holdings to protect them from potential creditors and claimants. Everything I've done is completely above board. You did this on purpose. You planned this whole thing. I responded to your betrayal appropriately. Linda's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and her face went even paler. What's wrong? Vince asked, though he suspected he knew. Trevor, his project, there's some kind of problem with permits. The Eastgate Commons seismic review? Yes, I heard there were some concerns about structural integrity. Linda stared at him with dawning horror. You did this. You're destroying his business. Trevor's destroying his own business by cutting corners and ignoring safety regulations. I simply brought those oversights to the attention of appropriate authorities. This is insane. You're destroying people's lives over a relationship that wasn't working anyway. Vince stood, his full height and presence filling the room. I'm protecting myself from people who thought they could use me and discard me. The fact that consequences exist for betrayal seems to surprise everyone involved. Linda backed toward the door. This isn't over, Vince. Patricia will find that her client has no credible claim to assets that never belonged to the marital estate. She'll also find that her client's boyfriend can no longer afford to pay her retainer fees. Linda's hand was on the doorknob when Vince delivered his final blow. Oh, and Linda, you should probably find somewhere else to stay tonight. The locks have been changed. Chapter 7. The walls close in. Trevor Hamilton's world imploded with mathematical precision. Dr. Rodriguez's seismic review revealed not just the foundation flaws Vince had identified, but additional structural problems that Trevor's cost-cutting engineering had concealed. The city issued a stop-work order pending a complete redesign, a process that would take months and cost millions Trevor didn't have. Within 48 hours, 3 major subcontractors pulled out of the project, invoking safety clauses in their contracts. The general contractor followed, demanding immediate payment for work already completed. Trevor's construction lender froze all disbursements pending resolution of the permit issues. Vince watched the collapse from his office, monitoring industry reports with the satisfaction of an engineer whose calculations had proven flawless. His phone rang constantly. Suppliers, subcontractors, and competitors calling to discuss acquiring distressed assets from Hamilton Construction's inevitable bankruptcy. But it was Miguel's call that brought the most interesting intelligence. Vince, my nephew Carlos, says Trevor's been making desperate phone calls all morning. To banks, investors, anyone who might provide emergency funding. No one's interested. What about his meeting with Linda? Carlos overheard part of it. Trevor told her the money's gone. Everything he'd set aside for their Costa Rica plan got invested in Eastgate Commons. Without that project's profits, he can't cover her legal fees, can't afford their hotel suite, can't maintain his lifestyle. How did she react? According to Carlos, she screamed at him for 10 minutes, called him a fraud and a failure, then stormed out. Haven't seen her since. Vince smiled. Linda was discovering that Trevor's charm became considerably less appealing when it wasn't backed by financial resources. His assistant buzzed the intercom. Mr. Marlowe, Rebecca is here to see you. She says it's urgent. Send her in. Rebecca entered looking haggard, her usually perfect appearance disheveled. She'd clearly been crying, her makeup smeared, her expensive clothes wrinkled as if she'd slept in them. Dad, I need to talk to you. I'm listening. Chad broke up with me this morning. He said his family can't be associated with financial instability and questionable business practices. His father told him I was a liability to his career. She collapsed into the chair across from his desk, the same chair where Linda had pleaded her case just days earlier. Dad, my life is falling apart. I can't live in a house because there's no power or water. I can't afford an apartment on my salary. Chad won't take my calls. Even my coworkers are treating me differently because I gave them an address where I obviously don't live. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate? Dad, I'm your daughter. I made a mistake, but I'm still your daughter. Vince studied her face, seeing echoes of the little girl who used to help him build birdhouses, but also recognizing the entitled woman who had cast him out based on lies. Rebecca, do you remember when you were 12 and you broke Mom's antique vase while playing with a football in the house? Dad, this isn't the time for... You blamed your brother Tommy. Said he threw the ball too hard. Said it was his fault for bringing the football inside. You let me punish him for something you did. Rebecca's face flushed. That was different. I was a kid. You were old enough to know right from wrong. And when I found out the truth, when Tommy finally told me what really happened, what did I say to you? Rebecca's voice dropped to a whisper. You said actions have consequences. And that lying about them makes the consequences worse. 23 years old, and you still haven't learned that lesson. Dad, please. I know I screwed up. I know I chose the wrong side. But I can't fix it if you won't let me. Some things can't be fixed, Rebecca. Some betrayals are permanent. So that's it. You're going to cut me out of your life forever because I believed Mom over you one time. I'm going to let you experience the consequences of your choices. Just like I'm letting your mother and Trevor experience the consequences of theirs. Rebecca stood, her voice rising with desperation. You're enjoying this. You're actually enjoying watching us suffer. I'm experiencing justice. There's a difference. This isn't justice, Dad. This is revenge. This is you punishing everyone who doesn't worship the ground you walk on. Vince's expression didn't change, but his voice carried a chill that made Rebecca step backward. I built everything you've ever known. This house, your education, your opportunities, your lifestyle, all of it came from my work, my sacrifice, my dedication to this family. And when your mother decided to throw it all away for a cheap affair, you sided with her based on lies. I said I was sorry. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust, Rebecca. Sorry doesn't undo betrayal. Sorry is just a word people use when they're facing consequences they don't like. Then what do you want from me? Nothing. I want nothing from you. The words hit Rebecca like physical blows. She stared at her father, seeing a stranger where once there had been unconditional love and support. Dad, you can't mean that. I can and I do. You made your choice. Now live with it. Rebecca fled from the office, her sobs echoing down the hallway. Vince turned back to his computer, where emails continued to arrive about Trevor's mounting business failures. His phone rang. Harvey Goldstein calling with an update. Vince, Patricia Brennan wants to meet. She's discovered the extent of your asset protection strategy and wants to discuss settlement terms. What kind of terms? Essentially, she's asking for mercy. Linda's situation is becoming untenable. No income, no assets, no housing. Brennan knows she can't touch her protected wealth, so she's hoping to negotiate some sort of spousal support agreement. Tell Patricia I'll consider meeting, but only if Linda demonstrates genuine accountability for her actions. What does that mean? It means she needs to provide a complete written confession of her affair, her plans to defraud me, and her role in turning our daughter against me. Signed, notarized, and submitted to the court record. Vince, that's essentially asking her to destroy any remaining credibility she might have in the divorce proceedings. That's exactly what I'm asking. And if she refuses, then she can experience poverty. I understand it builds character. After hanging up, Vince opened his desk drawer and pulled out the photographs Miguel had first shown him, the images that had started this campaign of justice. Linda embracing Trevor, planning their future with money stolen from the man who had given her everything. His intercom buzzed again. Mr. Marlowe, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says his name is Tommy Marlowe. Vince's heart stopped. Tommy wasn't due back from overseas for another 6 weeks. Send him in. The door opened to reveal Vince's son in dress uniform, his young face grim with purpose. At 19, Tommy had inherited his father's height and broad shoulders, but his eyes held a maturity that came from months in active deployment. Dad! Tommy, you're early. Emergency leave. Rebecca called me. Cry about some family crisis. Took me 3 days to get transport back to the States. Tommy closed the door behind him and stood at attention. Dad, I need to know what the hell is going on. Chapter 8. Blood and Judgment. Tommy had always been different from Rebecca, where she craved luxury and attention. He sought purpose and structure. At 17, he'd shocked the family by enlisting rather than accepting his guaranteed spot at the University of Washington. Vince had been secretly proud. The military would teach Tommy lessons about honor and consequence that no amount of privilege could provide. Sit down, son. Tommy remained standing, his military bearing rigid. Rebecca says you've cut off all financial support. Says mom's filed for divorce and is living in some cheap motel. Says her boyfriend dumped her and she can't afford an apartment. All of that is accurate. She also says you've lost your mind, that you're destroying the family over some paranoid delusions about mom cheating. Vince opened his desk drawer and pulled out the manila envelope Miguel had given him months earlier. He spread the photographs across his desk, clear images of Linda and Trevor's affair. Tommy's military composure cracked as he studied each photo, the timestamps, the undeniable evidence of his mother's betrayal. Jesus Christ. There's more. Vince activated his computer, playing audio recordings from the private investigator's surveillance. Linda's voice filled the office. Once the divorce is final, we'll have enough from Vince's assets to start fresh in Costa Rica. Tommy listened to his mother plan her husband's financial destruction with the clinical attention he'd learned analyzing enemy intelligence overseas. When the recordings finished, Tommy finally sat down, his face pale, but his jaw set with familiar determination. How long have you known? For months. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were serving your country. Because you shouldn't have to choose between your parents. Because I wanted to handle this myself. Tommy nodded slowly. Rebecca said you're being cruel, that you're punishing her for taking mom's side. I'm letting everyone experience the consequences of their choices. What were Rebecca's choices? Vince explained the dinner invitation, the text message, the systematic exclusion based on Linda's lies. Tommy listened without interruption, his expression growing harder with each detail. She chose Mom over you without even asking for your side of the story. Yes. And now she wants you to fix everything because her boyfriend dumped her and she can't afford a lifestyle. Yes. Tommy stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline his father had helped build. After several minutes of silence, he turned back. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need a completely honest answer. Go ahead. Are you doing this for justice or for revenge? The question hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Vince considered his answer carefully, knowing that his relationship with his son, the only family member who had remained loyal, depended on his honesty. Both, he said finally. I'm ensuring that people who betrayed me face appropriate consequences. Whether you call that justice or revenge depends on your perspective. And you're comfortable with that? I'm comfortable with the fact that actions have consequences. I'm comfortable with the fact that betrayal shouldn't be rewarded. I'm comfortable with protecting myself from people who try to use and discard me. Tommy nodded slowly. What about mercy? What about forgiveness? Tommy, if an enemy soldier shot one of your buddies and then asked for mercy, what would you do? I'd neutralize the threat. Your mother and sister shot me in the back, son, metaphorically speaking. Then they asked for mercy when they realized I was still alive and capable of fighting back. And Trevor's a casualty of war. He chose to involve himself in someone else's family. He chose to steal another man's wife and plot that man's destruction. Now he's learning that some men fight back. Tommy was quiet for several minutes, processing everything he'd learned. Finally, he spoke. What do you need from me? Nothing. You've served your country with honor. You don't need to be involved in this. Dad, you're my father. Rebecca's my sister, even if she's made terrible choices. Mom's my mother, even if she's betrayed you. I can't just pretend none of this is happening. What are you suggesting? Let me talk to Rebecca. Let me try to make her understand the magnitude of what she did. Maybe if it comes from me. Vince considered the proposal. Tommy had always been Rebecca's protector, the brother who looked out for her despite their different personalities. If anyone could break through her sense of entitlement, it might be him. And if she doesn't listen, then she lives with the consequences, just like you said. What about your mother? Tommy's expression hardened. Mom made her choices. She chose another man over our family. She chose to lie and manipulate and plan your destruction. As far as I'm concerned, she's dead to me. The words carried the finality of a military execution order. Vince felt a mixture of pride and sadness. Pride that his son understood honor and loyalty. Sadness that his family had been reduced to this stark calculation of allegiance and betrayal. Tommy, I want you to understand something. What I'm doing to your mother and Trevor, it's not just about the affair. It's about the systematic planning, the lies, the manipulation, the attempt to turn you and Rebecca against me while stealing everything I'd built. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a calculated campaign of destruction. I understand, Dad. And honestly, in the Army, we call that enemy action. You respond to enemy action with overwhelming force. Are you comfortable with that? I'm comfortable with the fact that you trusted your family and they betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. I'm comfortable with the fact that actions have consequences, especially for people who should know better. Vince studied his son's face, seeing the man he'd become during months of overseas deployment. The boy who'd left home was gone, replaced by someone who understood that the world could be brutal and that survival sometimes required brutal responses. All right, talk to Rebecca. But Tommy, if she rejects your counsel, if she continues to blame me for the consequences of her own choices, then she's on her own. Understood. Tommy stood and headed for the door, then turned back. Dad, for what it's worth, I think Mom and Rebecca forgot something important about you. What's that? You didn't build this empire by being weak. You didn't succeed in construction by letting people walk over you. They thought they could manipulate you because you love them. They forgot that love has limits, and that even good men have breaking points. And Trevor, Tommy's smile was cold as winter wind. Trevor never knew you at all. He's about to get an education. Chapter 9. The Reckoning Complete. 3 days later, Tommy sat across from Rebecca in a downtown coffee shop, watching his sister pick at a muffin she couldn't afford. Her appearance had deteriorated further. Designer clothes that now looked desperate rather than elegant. Makeup that couldn't hide the stress lines forming around her eyes. Tommy, thank God you're here. Maybe you can talk sense into Dad. He's completely lost his mind. I've seen the evidence, Rebecca. Photos, recordings, financial documents. Mom wasn't just cheating. She was planning to destroy Dad financially and disappear to another country. Rebecca's face crumpled. That doesn't mean he has to destroy our whole family. Our family was already destroyed. Mom destroyed it when she decided to fuck Trevor Hamilton and plot Dad's humiliation. The crude language made Rebecca flinch, but Tommy's expression remained hard. You destroyed it when you chose to believe her lies over trusting the man who gave you everything. I made a mistake. You made a choice. A choice to exclude Dad from your celebration based on accusations you never bothered to verify. A choice to side with someone who was actively betraying him. Tommy, I was confused. Mom made it sound like Dad was being paranoid and controlling. And you believed her. Without question. Without talking to Dad. Without considering that maybe the woman planning to flee the country with another man's money might not be the most reliable source of information. Rebecca started crying again, but Tommy didn't soften his expression. Rebecca, do you know what we call it in the Army when someone betrays their unit? What? Treason. And do you know what the penalty for treason is? She shook her head. Execution. Dad's not executing you. He's just cutting you out of his life. Considering what you did, that's mercy. This is insane. He's my father. I'm his daughter. Families forgive each other. Families support each other. Families trust each other. Families don't cast each other out based on lies from cheating spouses. Tommy leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Rebecca, I've spent 8 months in a combat zone. I've seen what happens when people you trust betray that trust. I've seen good soldiers die because someone they counted on chose the wrong side. This isn't a war zone, Tommy. Isn't it? Mom declared war on Dad when she started fucking his business rival. You chose sides when you believed her lies. Now you're experiencing what happens to people who pick the losing side. Rebecca wiped her eyes with a napkin. So that's it? Dad's never going to forgive me. I don't know. Maybe. But forgiveness has to be earned, and you haven't even acknowledged the magnitude of what you did. I said I was sorry. Sorry isn't enough. Sorry is what you say when you accidentally break something. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate choice to side against your father based on lies from a woman who was actively betraying him. Tommy pulled out his phone and showed Rebecca a photo. Their father at a construction site, covered in concrete dust, his face lined with exhaustion. This is how Dad looked last week. 52 years old, working 16-hour days to build something lasting for his family. While he was breaking his back to provide for us, Mom was planning his destruction, and you were helping her exclude him from family events. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. It was easier to believe Mom's version because it didn't require you to question anything or make hard choices. Rebecca stared at the photo, really seeing her father's exhaustion for the first time. What do I have to do? First, you have to understand that Dad doesn't owe you anything. Not forgiveness, not financial support, not a relationship. You burned that bridge. Okay. Second, you have to accept that your lifestyle is over. No more house you can't afford. No more expensive clothes. No more boyfriend whose family sees you as a liability. You're going to have to build your own life from scratch. I can't afford. Then you'll learn to live within your means. Dad started with nothing and built an empire. You can start with nothing and build a life. Tommy stood to leave, then turned back. Rebecca, if you genuinely want a chance at reconciliation, you need to prove you understand what you did wrong and that you're willing to accept responsibility for your choices. Not sorry because you got caught responsibility. Real acknowledgement of the magnitude of your betrayal. How do I do that? Figure it out. Dad doesn't owe you a roadmap to forgiveness. That same evening, Vince received a call from Patricia Brennan. Mr. Marlowe, my client would like to discuss the terms you outlined. The written confession? Yes. She's prepared to provide a complete statement acknowledging her affair and her planning activities. In exchange for what? Modest spousal support. Enough to secure basic housing and transportation. Vince considered the offer. Linda's complete humiliation was within reach. a signed confession that would destroy any remaining credibility she might have in social or legal circles. I'll consider it, but the confession has to be complete. Every detail of the affair, every aspect of the financial planning, every lie she told about me. And she has to acknowledge that she manipulated our daughter as part of her scheme. Mr. Marlowe, that level of detail would be devastating to her reputation. Patricia, your client, tried to destroy my family and steal my life's work. Her reputation is the least of my concerns. 2 days later, Linda sat in Patricia Brennan's office, signing a 12-page confession that detailed her infidelity, her planning with Trevor, and her systematic manipulation of their daughter. Each signature felt like cutting away another piece of her dignity. "This will haunt me forever," she said as she finished the last page. "Mrs. Marlowe, your husband could have left you with nothing. This arrangement gives you a chance to rebuild your life." Linda looked up, her eyes hollow. "What life? Trevor's bankrupt. My daughter won't speak to me. My son considers me dead. My reputation is destroyed. You'll have enough money to start over somewhere else." Start over as what? A 50-year-old woman with no job skills and a documented history of infidelity and fraud? Patricia had no answer. Meanwhile, Trevor Hamilton sat in his nearly empty office, watching movers take away the last of his furniture. Hamilton Construction was finished. Bankruptcy proceedings had begun, assets were being liquidated, and his reputation in the construction industry was permanently destroyed. His phone rang one final time. The caller ID showed Vince Marlowe. "Trevor." "Vince, come to gloat. Actually, I called to thank you." "Thank me? You taught me something valuable about the people I thought I could trust. You showed me that even 25 years of marriage and fatherhood weren't enough to earn genuine loyalty from my family." "Vince, you destroyed everything. My business, Linda's life, Rebecca's future. Was it worth it?" "Trevor, you destroyed my family when you decided to steal my wife. I just made sure there were consequences for that choice. You're a cold bastard. I'm a man who protects what he builds. You should have remembered that before you try to tear it down." The line went dead. 6 months later, Vince Marlowe stood on the observation deck of his newest tower, watching the Seattle skyline stretch toward distant mountains. His phone buzzed with a text from Tommy, now stationed in Colorado. "Proud of you, Dad. You handled this like a man." Rebecca had sent exactly one message in the past 3 months. "I understand now what I did to you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I understand." He hadn't replied. Linda had moved to Portland, living in a modest apartment on the spousal support payments that would continue for exactly 5 years. Enough time, he decided, for her to learn how to support herself. Trevor had left Seattle entirely, his whereabouts unknown. Vince's construction empire continued to grow. His reputation for ruthless competence had only been enhanced by the systematic destruction of those who had betrayed him. Competitors now approached him with deeper respect, understanding that Vincent Marlowe was not a man to be crossed. He pulled out his phone and looked at a photo Miguel had sent him. A family barbecue, 3 generations gathered around picnic tables, children playing in the background. The caption read, "This is what loyalty looks like." Vince smiled and pocketed the phone. He'd lost a family, but he'd gained something more valuable: the knowledge that he would never again allow sentiment to cloud his judgment about people's true nature. In the distance, construction cranes moved like mechanical prayers against the evening sky, building new structures on foundations of steel and uncompromising strength. Some things once broken could never be repaired, but a man of strength could always build something. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.